there, welcome to the Football Bloc. My name is Brandon. Today I'm going to give you my predictions for the 2026 World Cup quarterfinals. So if that sounds just interesting, let's hop right into it. So the World Cup quarterfinals are finally here. We are getting closer and closer before we can crown the kings of the world for 2026. 8 teams left, 4 matchups here, some pretty good matchups on deck. So let's look at each of these matchups. If you follow my channel, you know the deal. I'm going to look at each and every single one of these games, these teams, and how their path up to this point, how they line up against each other, and then of course a match prediction. The first game we're going to start off with is France versus Morocco. I think France has been by far the best team at this World Cup. It's not to say that they've been perfect. They have some flaws, specifically defensively. But overall, I think they have been the best team just in terms of how they play on the pitch, the brand of football that they have, and also just how exciting they are. This is, almost perfect football, I would say, like a perfect attacking football, I would say, because they do have some defensive flaws. Now, the argument is you can say that they haven't really faced a big team. They beat Senegal. They beat Senegal, but Senegal did kind of outplay them, I would say, for the first 45 minutes. Of course, France is always going to be favored against Iraq in the next game. And then they did play Norway in the third group game, but it was a heavily rotated Norway squad. Norway did not play with most of their starters. And then in the round of 32 and in the round of 16, France faced off against Sweden and Paraguay. So not necessarily a star-studded lineup. The best team out of the bunch is probably either Senegal or Norway. But if you look at how they played, Senegal throughout this World Cup has been in a kind of a disappointment with a lot of internal issues. And like I said, Norway played a backup squad in that game. So not the best lineup of teams, but you do have to say, look, you got to play who's in front of you. It's not France's fault that they've been playing a bunch of smaller teams, and they have showed up in every single one of these games. The amount of goals that they've been scoring is insane. Mbappe, besides Messi, has been the best player of this tournament, and then Olise and Dembele are up there for the next best player after those two. So it's, all around the pitch, it's been fantastic to see. Like I said, though, every once in a while, they give up some mistakes. It will be interesting to see how they line up against Morocco, who they played in the 2022 World Cup semifinals. That was, of course, the end of the fairy tale run for Morocco 4 years ago. And I will say, going into this tournament, I thought that Morocco was going to be somewhat of a disappointment. I had them as my flop team, actually. It was a bit of a hot take. And they have completely proven me wrong. Morocco is definitely up there among the world's elites right now. They earned their way into the World Cup quarterfinals. They have been the best team outside of Europe, or outside of Europe and South America, this World Cup, by a considerable mile. And I think if you look at this Morocco team, one thing I will say is I think we are in the witnessing the creation of Morocco as a mainstay in world football. If you just look at how they play, the comfortability, how just easily they play in these games here, and it's not like a typical underdog team, so to speak, where they just put 11 guys in front of the goal. They're just trying to play Route 1 football. Morocco plays good football, and they have a very talented squad to be able to maintain in that style of play. I mean, they outplayed Brazil, they outplayed the Netherlands, and even in games where they didn't necessarily play good, they still found a way to win, like against Canada, and that is the mark of a serious team. And also, if you just look at their player pool, they're producing a bunch of super talented players, and it looks like they won't stop anytime soon. That being said, they face a very, very tough obstacle here against France. This is going to be a really interesting matchup, especially since a lot of these Moroccan players were either born in France or play their club football in France as well. So that'll be very interesting to see. I am going to say that France is probably going to come out on top here. France is going to play the way that France has been playing this entire tournament. Foot on the gas pedal. They're going to force you into mistakes. They're going to go 110% run at you. Versus Morocco. Morocco's very versatile. They can switch back and forth between, being more defensive, but then they also can score a bunch of goals here. So it'll make it interesting for France. But just the gargantuan attacking prowess that France have right now, I think, is unbeatable. I'm going to side with France. I'm going to say 2-1. I think that Morocco will get a goal. Like I said, every once in a while, France can leak a chance here. But the attack for France is it's too strong to overlook. So I'm saying 2-1 to France. Next up, we have Spain versus Belgium. And as an American, this pains me that the United States is not the one here playing Spain. Instead, it's Belgium. That being said, Belgium fully deserved their spot here in this quarterfinal. The U.S. did not show up in that quarterfinal matchup. If you're interested to hear a more in-depth take on that, tune in or watch the replays on my live streams. I might actually do another live stream talking about how this, how the aftermath of this, how this is going to affect U.S. soccer. But regardless, Belgium showed up on the night and were a better team, which is interesting because throughout this World Cup, Belgium has not been very good, in my opinion. They tied Iran and they tied Egypt. Egypt outplayed them, I think, and Iran had some good chances against them as well. They got a clutch win against New Zealand, but New Zealand is a team that is several levels below Belgium in terms of just pure talent. And then Belgium was 5 minutes away from being eliminated against Senegal. They were 2-0 down into the 85th minute, and they flipped the switch and were able to come back. Now, you can look at this one of two ways. You can say, well, they were down 2-0 against Senegal, and also a Senegal team that has a whole bunch of issues internally. But you can also say they came back and won the game. That shows a lot of spirit. And then, again, they brought that into the United States game, and they beat the U.S. handily. I think that's more so on the U.S. collapsing, but still. Belgium have momentum on their side. I don't think that they're going to get completely flattened by Spain, but it's very clear that Spain is the favorite here. This Belgian team is not like the golden generation it was. You still have remnants of that team. De Bruyne is still there, even though he didn't play against the U.S. Lukaku is there, even though he's coming off the bench. Courtois is the mainstay, and he's one of the best goalkeepers, if not the best goalkeeper in the world. So you can't count him out. But if you just look at the defense, for example, Belgium's defense is the weak link of their team, both just in personnel and the style of football that they play. As for Spain, they went into this tournament as a tournament favorite. A lot of people had them winning the entire thing, or at the very least making the semifinals. And it looks like they will at least make the semifinals. But I will say, they are growing into the tournaments, and I wouldn't be surprised if they end up winning it all come the end of July. And they started off a little shaky. They tied Cape Verde 0-0. It wasn't that great of a performance. I've heard some people say that, they played well, they just didn't have the finishing touch. I can see that argument, but after watching the replays again, after watching that game for the first time, I'm like, I don't know. I thought Spain looked really dull, and they gave away a few chances there. But, they turned it up against Saudi, but you can also say, well, it's Saudi, and also the way they play lines up well for Spain there. And then they beat Uruguay, but I will say they got a little lucky with that mistake from Muslera in goal. But Spain flipped it on in the knockout rounds. They flattened Austria. Very easy, comfortable win for them. They played so good on the night. And then they had a huge matchup against Portugal. And it was pretty close. Portugal, I thought, was a tough opponent for that game there. They had some chances, but Spain, I think, endured. They played good. They were very solid in all areas of the pitch, and they grinded out a win. And it's not one of these where it's like, a terrible performance by any means or something like that. No, Spain, I think, played well. It was just a tough opponent. And the Spanish team has a lot of, I would say, similarities to the 2010 team. There's, a lot of parallels you can draw here. Even though they didn't lose against Cape Verde, they started off the tournament with a poor performance, just like Spain in 2010, where they lost to Switzerland. You can also say that they turned it up in the next 2 group games. They played Portugal in the round of 16, defeated them 1-0, and look what happened at the end of 2010. Spain came out on top. Are we going to see a repeat of that here in 2026? I think it's very possible. Spain does have some flaws. If you look at how one of the reasons they were so good in Euro 2024 was the directness that they had from guys like Nico Williams and Lamine Yamal. Nico Williams is injured, and he hasn't played at all this tournament. It doesn't look like he really is going to play a crucial factor, which is unfortunate. And Lamine Yamal had an injury going into the World Cup, and he has come back, but I would say he's like maybe 50%, 60%. Like, he's not, playing to his full capacity, and it's very obvious on the pitch. That being said, Spain have filled in other areas. Their defense has been so sound. They have yet to concede a single goal this entire World Cup. Their midfield as well, it's also very solid. Rodri looks back in form. Of course, a guy like Pedri, a guy like Dani Olmo and Fabian Ruiz, these very talented players are going to be able to showcase their skill. Oyarzabal has been the guy that's shown up, though, with, I believe, 4 goals, maybe 3 or 4 goals this World Cup thus far, being very clutch, very, very underrated player as well, who fits well with the Spanish team. So I think this game is going to be relatively straightforward. All signs point to Spain being the better team on the pitch, and if you look at how Belgium play, they know they're going to concede a few goals. They're just going to try and outscore you, and I don't think they're going to be able to do that against this Spanish attack. I mean, Belgium's attack is good, but Spain's defense is so airtight that I don't think they'll be able to break through. Not to mention, they won't be able to keep him out on the other end of the pitch. Like I said before, I don't think Belgium's going to get completely rolled over, but I do think Spain is going to have a comprehensive win here. I'm going to say 2-0 Spain. All right, so now let's move on to the next 2 games here. We have, we have Norway going up against England. This is a very interesting match. This match should promise a lot of goals. Both of these teams have been very high scoring throughout this World Cup. And it's also going to be very interesting for the Erling Haaland narrative. Haaland has been one of the absolute best players this World Cup. He's in the Golden Boot race. He's got 7 goals already this World Cup, which is insane. But people in England know Haaland very well. Obviously, the star of Manchester City, won the treble with them, won several Premier League titles with them. So it's going to be interesting to see how he lines up against all these English defenders here. Speaking of Norway, I briefly mentioned them talking about France. They came out of the same group as France. Started off the tournaments with a 4-1 win over Iraq. They got the job done there. I thought they did look a little shaky at times, but still, first game of the World Cup. And I think where they excelled was in their next game against Senegal. I think they just on paper were just a much better team against Senegal going into this tournament, who were technically the African champions, depending on who you ask. Now, granted, yes, as I said before, Senegal have a whole bunch of internal problems and stuff like that, but Norway had a very good performance in that match there, and it was kind of a make or break moment because Norway had heavy expectations going into this World Cup, and they were playing some fantastic football to qualify for this World Cup. But it was very it was not a guarantee that they would really show up. And yes, okay, they beat Iraq. They were expected to. So that game against Senegal was crucial, and they passed with flying colors. Then, like I said, in the next game, in the third group game, they had already qualified to the knockout round, so they kind of played a second string of players, and they lost to France. But they still scored, and they had a bunch of chances. It was 4-1, but it could have been 4-2, maybe even 4-3. Then in the round of 32, they lined up against Ivory Coast, and they didn't have the best performance. Ivory Coast was a tough opponent, but they came out on top. Overall, they were the better team. I think they had more of the more dangerous chances. And then the big game, though, is they were able to eliminate Brazil in the round of 16, sending shockwaves throughout the world. I mean, Brazil is Brazil. I know this is probably the weakest Brazil squad that I've ever seen. But they have the history, they have the bravado, they have the experience, and they have Carlo Ancelotti as their manager, and they have world-class players like Vinny Jr., who's been in great form this World Cup, Alisson, Gabriel, Marquinhos. The team is still a good team, just, by comparison, it's not comparable to past Brazilian squads. But this was a gargantuan task for Norway, and a lot of people, including myself, thought they weren't up to it. But Erling Haaland showed up with 2 clutch goals, and Nyland, the goalkeeper, exploded into life and had a fantastic game there. And Brazil were eliminated by Norway. So Norway have crazy momentum on their side. They have, they're playing with house money at this point. No one thought that they would really go this far. People had high expectations, but beating Brazil and getting to the quarterfinals is crazy. I will say, though, they do have one major flaw, and that is their defense. They have conceded 8 goals up until this point, and we're not even in the quarterfinals yet. That's not a very good return. That's a little under 2 goals a game, and early on in the tournament, when you can simply outscore your opponents, that's sustainable. That's okay. But now we're getting into the business end of the tournament. That's going to be very tough to maintain that style. So, that being said, you can also argue that Nyland really showed up when it mattered most against Brazil. On to England. They have been an interesting team this tournament. A lot of people had them as favorites as well, or at least among the favorites going into this World Cup. And it looked like they were going to meet expectations when they had a really good game and very good performance against Croatia in their opening match there. But I don't know, man. I feel like they kind of, I don't want to say fallen off, but the performance level has dropped since then. They tied Ghana, very dull game, a game where I think Carlos Queiroz, the manager of Ghana, kind of outsmarted Thomas Tuchel, England's manager there. And then England lined up against Panama in their last group game, and they beat them. It ended up being 2-0, but I think England were a little lucky. Panama had a whole bunch of chances. They made it really tough. Not to say that I think Panama would have won or anything like that, but I don't know. In my opinion, that game kind of had like 1-1 draw all over it or something like that. Like I am surprised that Panama didn't get a single goal this entire World Cup. Side tangent, but unfortunate for them because they played well. But going back to England, then in the round of 32, they had a good matchup against DR Congo, and this was their toughest game the whole World Cup thus far. Arguably, although the Mexico game was tough too. But the fact that DR Congo scored first and England were trailing for most of the game was very crazy to see. I think that England showed that they have some defensive flaws. That being said, we've been talking all about Haaland. You can't count out Harry Kane, who scored 2 clutch goals against DR Congo in quick succession to pull England out of the abyss and qualify them to the quarterfinals. Harry Kane has been arguably the best player in the world this year. He's been fantastic for Bayern Munich, the Bundesliga, and the Champions League, DFB Pokal. He's been scoring an insane amount of goals, and that form has directly carried over into this World Cup with England. There's talks of Ballon d'Or shouts, and I think, honestly, at this point, there really isn't a front runner. I think he might be the most honorable choice for the Ballon d'Or at this point. But heading into the quarterfinals, as a result of Harry Kane saving England, they lined up against one of the hosts, Mexico, in what ended up being a very tough game. In Mexico City, you had the host advantage. There's also a huge storm beforehand, so the game was delayed. England did just enough to come out on top. They proved that they were ultimately the better team, even though Mexico made it really, really tough for them. Jude Bellingham showed up when it mattered most. He scored 2 goals in quick succession in the first half there. Mexico got back into the game, 2 goals from Quinones and Raul Jimenez as well, but still, Harry Kane, with that penalty there to make it 3-1, ended up being the game-winning goal. Again, England had it tough. There was a red card there to Kwanzaa, but they survived, which shows a lot of grit and character. I think with this England team, they don't necessarily play the best football, but they know how to grind out results. And when you have players like Harry Kane or Jude Bellingham or Anthony Gordon or Declan Rice or even someone like Dan Burn, who got subbed on to just batten down the hatches against Mexico. When you have players like that, you can go very far. And honestly, like, you know, has a Thomas Tuchel team ever played fantastic football? You know, like, okay, maybe Dortmund when he coached them with all those, you know, emerging talents at the time. But, you know, he won the Champions League with Chelsea, not really playing that great football. He kind of just was able to get the team to be super effective in the right moments, and they ended up going all the way and winning the tournament. He got PSG to the Champions League final the year before, and they weren't really playing that great football either, but he was able to drag them all the way to the final. So, you know, Thomas Tuchel, that's the type of manager he is. Now, looking at these two teams here, for everything that I said about England, that's why I am going to side with England. I think they are the better team here, and like I said, the clutch players that England have, and then the glaring errors that Norway have in defense makes me think that they're going to go through. I think it's not going to be easy, and I think Haaland's still going to grab a few goals. That guy's in like insanely hot form right now, but so is Harry Kane. So I'm saying 3-2. I think it's going to be a shootout between Harry Kane and Erling Haaland, just those two guys in particular there. On to the last quarterfinal here. We have a very interesting one. We have the sole South American team left, Argentina, and the reigning champions, going up against one of the surprise teams that snuck their way into the quarterfinals, Switzerland. We'll start off with Switzerland. They're a very solid team. You know, it's funny. I had Switzerland. I initially was tempted to put Switzerland as one of my like dark horse teams or surprise teams, but I thought that even though I have a lot of praise for the Swiss team, I thought that the lineup that they have going for them in the bracket, like who they would potentially play next, would be too tough for them to handle, and I thought that they would go out relatively early, but that was not the case. You know, Switzerland has been having a great run. They started off a little slow against Qatar. They ended up drawing 1-1 there, but then they ended up beating Bosnia. It was a tough game, but their game kind of ran away from Bosnia. And then they played really well to defeat Canada. And they had a very good performance against Algeria. And then they lined up against Colombia in the quarterfinals there, in a very, very tough game. A game where both of the teams had a very good defensive display and were, you know, kind of firing blanks going forward. But it went to penalties, and Kobel stepped up when his team needed him most, despite the fact that Switzerland missed some of their penalties. Kanji there missed that crucial penalty, but Kobel stepped up big, and now Switzerland find themselves in the quarterfinals up against the reigning world champions. One of the weaknesses of Switzerland, I would say, is outside of Monzambi, who is probably the I guess emerging talent of this World Cup up to this point, or at least one of them, they do have trouble scoring goals. We saw that against Qatar, and honestly we saw that against Bosnia. Even though they ended up scoring 4, it was only after the red card that Bosnia got. And then we saw that against Colombia as well. They have some attacking firepower, but I feel like if you compare them to any of the other teams in this tournament, they by far have the weakest attack. And honestly, their squad, it's a solid team, but there is a lack of world-class players, I would say. Xhaka is probably the sole world-class player. Maybe you can argue for Kobel, but other than that, there really isn't any stars in the team. It's just a bunch of good players that stick together and have a cohesive team unit, which will take you far, but I don't think it'll take them past Argentina. Speaking of Argentina, they have had a very interesting path up until this point, and they went into this World Cup obviously as the reigning world champions, but also as back-to-back South American champions, winning both the 2021 and 2024 Copa America. This team is going through a dynasty. They are one of the most experienced teams in the world and of all time. They know how they play. They have no qualms about it. And I think in this World Cup, they kind of leaned into it a little bit too much. They had an easy group stage. in terms of who they were drawn against, and they made light work of it. They easily defeated Algeria, easily defeated Austria, and easily defeated Jordan with a rotated squad. But the first time that they faced some real adversity was Cape Verde, who is another one of the surprise teams of this World Cup, and Cape Verde made them sweat, and I think that is because Argentina let them into the game. Argentina played very arrogant, in my opinion, and they had to rely on their individual talent to pull them through. But they got that winning spirit back, it's seemingly, until they went up against Egypt in the next round. And Egypt, from minute 1 to say minute 69, 70, 71, or around that time, was the better team. Egypt defended well. They made it very tough for Argentina. Even though Argentina created a lot of chances, it was very tough for them to score. And Egypt racked up a 2-0 lead out of nowhere. It was crazy. But then, I said this in a live stream the other night, Argentina woke up after that second goal, and then they flattened Egypt. They showed why they are the world champions. And as I said before with Morocco, this is a mark of a great team. You can play well, or you can not play well, and still find a way to pull through. You have clutch players that show up in clutch moments. And also, Argentina is playing with this confidence that no other team in the world has. And also, you can't look over Lionel Messi, who, with 8 goals this tournament, is the current top scorer. He's been playing some insane football at the age of 39. He's the best player of all time. If there was ever any doubt, he is the best player of all time. I do think Argentina have some glaring issues. Their defense was never good. Their defense wasn't really that strong when they ended up winning the World Cup in 2022. At times, they're not really tested, but they're able to pull through. Emi Martinez is a fantastic goalkeeper, but he is coming off of a finger injury. He broke his finger in the Europa League final there. So Argentina are going to concede a few goals. I mean, up to this point, they've conceded 5 goals, and they haven't played any serious opposition. That is another flaw as well. The teams that they played are all teams that are considerably below them. There was no one that was equal or at least close to their talent level. But to be honest, I don't think Switzerland is one of those teams. I do think that Argentina is head and shoulders above Switzerland. It's going to be tough, but I don't think Switzerland have enough teeth in their attack, especially with the injury to Manzambi, to cause some serious damage to Argentina. Switzerland will defend good, and with Julian Alvarez in struggling form due to his own injury, I think it's going to be close. But I think we're going to see a repeat scoreline of when these two teams played each other in the round of 16 of the 2014 World Cup. So I'm saying 1-0 Argentina. So let me know if you agree or you disagree. I'm saying that the quarterfinals are going to finish with France and Spain, England, and Argentina all heading through to the quarterfinal, or the semifinal, excuse me. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think of my opinions here. I don't really think I'm dropping too many hot takes. I think these are kind of, pretty down the line, predictions here. But let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Share this video with a friend. Follow the Football Bloc on social media. But anyway, guys, my name is Brandon. This has been the Football Bloc, and I hope you have a nice rest of your night.